And in that moment, as the winds of the new era began to stir, Abizara knew one thing for certain. This was the beginning of a new world. Epilogue: The Dawn of the New Age. As Opa book title.
Open book title, The Chaos Crown, A Tale of Eminence in Shadow. Chapter 1, The seal breaks, and so does everything else. It began with a whisper. Not one born from lips or lungs, but from the very bones of the world. A deep, ancient groan, like the earth itself remembering something it was forced to forget. Somewhere far beneath the city of Midgar, in an ancient cavern warped by time and dripping with forgotten history, Sid Kajanu stood with a confident smirk. His dark cloak fluttered dramatically, despite the complete lack of wind. "All right," he muttered, surveying the chamber. "This shall be known as the prison of the primal calamity." He unsheathed his slime blade and pointed it toward an enormous, intricate glyph carved into the wall. It pulsed faintly green and sickly, like it was still breathing. "To add the proper level of theatrical flair," he whispered, striking a pose, "I must unseal the ancient evil that slumbers within. Only then can I defeat it, as shadow." With zero hesitation and full delusion, he stabbed the glowing glyph. The world screamed. Cracks tore through reality like glass shattering in slow motion. The glyph exploded outward in a surge of sickly green light, bathing the cavern in radiated brilliance. Slime dripped from the very air, oozing down walls and pooling around Sid's boots. The ground melted. The air curdled. And from the center of it all, she emerged. Abizara the Crownless. Hair like melted emerald fire, eyes glowing with madness and purpose, and skin licked with radioactive sludge. Her black dress clung to her like a funeral shroud, decaying even as it reformed. Fangs gleamed behind a wicked smile, dripping venom, hunger, and something far more ancient. She took one deep breath and smiled wider. Oxygen. Stale. Flavored with fear. Sid blinked. Oh. Cool visual effect. Her gaze locked onto him like a hawk spotting prey. "You." She stepped forward, sludge hissing with each movement, and the world tilted slightly around her. "You're the one," she purred, radioactive fangs glinting. "The one who broke the seal. The shadow cloaked in delusion. The god of irony." She tilted her head, grin widening. "I will fight you, and nothing will stop me." Sid, ever composed in his delusions, nodded slowly. "As expected, you're the real deal." Shadow Garden, somewhere far above, immediately felt the tremors. Alpha turned sharply. Something just woke up. Chapter 2, The Cult and the Crownless. There were few things Abizara hated more than waiting. She had waited in silence for eons, sealed beyond time and thought, embraced by oblivion. But now? Now, she was awake, unshackled, undying, and utterly unimpressed by the world's tiny, pathetic sense of order. And worst of all? Sid was gone. The moment he disappeared in a puff of dramatic shadow teleportation, her smile cracked. He had vanished mid-monologue, mid-foreplay, really. The audacity. The tease. So, she rose from the melted cavern, radioactive waste pooling behind her like a venomous cloak, and followed the scent of those who dared to touch her seal. She climbed from the underground like a sickness resurfacing in a once-cured body, heading toward the trembling pulse of magic she'd tasted in her awakening. Shadow Garden Outpost, Base Gamma. It was a sleek, hidden fortress of stone and shadow. Guarded. Magical. Meticulously designed. It lasted exactly 9 seconds. Abizara appeared in a wave of green, her form oozing through the walls like living poison. Alarm spells blinked, barriers tried to hold, and then melted. Soldiers and operatives barely turned before they were caught in her radiated aura. Screams twisted through the halls as her fangs sank into flesh, not to feed, but to corrupt. Victims aged, mutated, cracked like porcelain dolls in the heat of a forge. "I like your outfits," she giggled, licking a drop of glowing blood from her lips. "But you're all dressed wrong for annihilation." A young operative attempted to attack, blades drawn. She caught his wrist. His bones liquefied with a sickening pop. "I asked for shadow," she whispered, eyes alight, "and you send me interns?" Meanwhile, at Shadow Garden HQ, Alpha slammed her hands on the table. Base Gamma just went dark. Beta narrowed her eyes. "That's the fourth one this week. She's hunting us." "She's not hunting us," Delta growled. "She's looking for shadow." There was silence. Even Epsilon stopped adjusting her hair. "She called us a cute cult," Zeta muttered. "Which would almost be funny," Beta said tightly, "if she hadn't disintegrated half our squad afterward." Back in the wreckage, Abazara stood alone amid the smoking ruins of the outpost. Her eyes gleamed with radiant fury, blood dripping from her fangs. "Come out, little god," she sang to no one, yet to him. "Let us write poetry with fists. Let us tear heaven in two." She tilted her head, a strand of glowing hair sliding over her cheek. "I'm done waiting." The hunt had begun. Chapter 3: Blood, Slime, and Shadow. Rain fell like judgment. Each droplet hissed as it hit Abazara's skin, steam rising from her body like she were forged in some corrupted furnace. The world seemed to blur around her, colors bending, magic recoiling. She walked through a forest now poisoned by her presence, trees sagging, wildlife long since fled. The earth decayed beneath every step. But her smile? Still radiant. Because she was close. So close. Sid's essence lingered in the air like the scent of ozone before a storm. It pulsed faintly, tugging her forward like a promise carved into bone. And then she felt it. Not him, but something adjacent. Sharp. Arrogant. Trained. "Ah," Abazara cooed, tilting her head. "They sent me a warm-up act." Enter Gamma, the elegant blade of Shadow Garden. She emerged from the treetops, landing with grace and steel drawn. Dressed in her battle regalia, refined and unreadable as always. Her aura was elegant, deadly, and calm. "You've made quite the mess," Gamma said flatly, scanning the rot around her. "Shadow Garden doesn't take kindly to threats against our members." Abazara chuckled, radioactive waste trailing from her fingers like streamers. "Oh, no threat, darling. Merely a purge. A cleansing of all that stands between me and him. You won't reach Lord Shadow. I will drink his soul and laugh through the ashes of your faith." Abazara lunged. The battle begins. Gamma parried the first strike, a swipe of toxic claws so fast it blurred. The second came with no warning, a wave of decaying sludge meant to erase her footing. Gamma spun over it, slicing through the air, mana blades glowing with radiant counterforce. They clashed in a flurry of sparks, rot meeting resistance. "You're fast," Abazara mused, her fangs gleaming. "But not fast enough." She bit the air literally, and her corrupted vampire magic surged. A green aura erupted, catching Gamma's leg mid-motion. The corruption began immediately, skin darkening, energy draining. Gamma gasped and flung herself backward, severing the infected armor piece. "You bite mana," she hissed. "I bite everything." Meanwhile, watching from afar. Up in the trees, cloaked in shadow, Sid observed with his arms crossed, expression unreadable. "This isn't part of any organization I made up," he muttered. He narrowed his eyes as Gamma clashed again with the radioactive entity below. "She's not following the script at all." A slight grin tugged at his lips. "Perfect. The turning point." Gamma, bleeding and slowed by corruption, fell to one knee. Abazara stood above her, fang bared, slime rising around her like tendrils of death.
Good warm-up, she purred, placing a glowing foot on Gamma's chest.
But I'm bored now. Suddenly, whoosh. A slash of black magic tore through the air between them, forcing Abazara back. A familiar voice echoed, calm yet theatrical. You've gone far enough. She turned and saw him. Shadow. Black mist swirling around him like the night itself had bent the knee. Her grin returned wild, delighted, sharp as her fangs. Found you. Chapter 4, Dance of Gods and Delusions. The forest held its breath. Trees wilted. Rain halted midair. Even time seemed to freeze for a heartbeat, caught between dread and anticipation. There they stood. Abazara the Crownless, dripping with radioactive venom, fangs gleaming, her presence warping the very fabric of existence. Shadow. His black coat billowed dramatically despite no wind. His eyes, shrouded beneath a veil of composed madness, glowed faintly. His posture was casual. Overconfident. Perfectly oblivious. Abazara's lips curled back into a delighted, wicked grin. You came, she whispered, voice trembling with obsession. You finally came. Sid Shadow nodded solemnly. Of course I did. Your power, it's too dangerous to be left unchecked. She shivered. Say that again. Slower. Sid, still deep in his fantasy roleplay, extended his hand. If I let you roam free, the world would crumble. So I'll defeat you, here and now. In the shadows. Abazara melted. Not literally, though the ground around her hissed and bubbled, but emotionally. You say the sweetest things, she murmured, stepping closer. Come then, god of my awakening. Dance with me. The clash begins. Their powers collided with an explosion that sent shockwaves through the rotted forest. Abazara lunged, her claws glowing with virulent energy, fangs bared to infect and devour. Sid sidestepped with practiced ease, countering with a slash of shadow energy that grazed her arm, but didn't bleed her. No. The wound absorbed the strike, pulsing green. Oh, she giggled. Feeding me already? Sid narrowed his eyes. You adapt. Impressive. He thinks this is a test. A boss fight. A chaptered arc. She thinks this is a date. They clashed again, faster this time. Abazara grinned wider with every blow he dodged, every counter he landed. This is what I was sealed away from, she sang. You glorious fool. I love it. Elsewhere, Shadow Garden watches. Far beyond the clearing, Alpha and Beta watch through a magical scrying orb, horror and awe flooding their faces. She's fighting him like she's enjoying it, Alpha said, stunned. Is she flirting with him? Beta barked. Zeta leaned closer. Is he flirting back? No, Delta growled. He's being Shadow. Gamma, now resting and recovering, groaned. Someone needs to kill me again. I want to skip this nightmare. Back in the arena of decay. Abazara leapt backward, summoning a wave of sludge like a tidal wave of death. Sid countered with a vortex of void magic, splitting it in half with a single motion. The sky cracked. The ground fractured. She landed lightly, crouching, tail of slime curling behind her. This is love, she whispered. Corrupted. Chaotic. Beautiful. Sid pointed his blade at her. You're strong. But not strong enough.
Abazara smiled wider, her fangs glowing.
You'll have to kill me to prove it. Sid paused. And smiled. I plan to. Chapter 5, Fangs, Fantasies, and Fallout. The battlefield lay scorched and trembling.
The corrupted earth hissed, trees turned to twisted ash sculptures, and the sky above was a swirling mess of green clouds and cracked magic.
Shadow and Abazara circled each other in silence, the tension thick enough to carve open. Sid, calm as ever, raised his blade. You've lasted longer than I expected.
Abazara tilted her head, radioactive slime dripping from her fingers like neon venom.
Oh, sweet Shadow. I haven't even started.
She raised her hand. The forest darkened. And then it appeared ripping itself from the depths of her corrupted soul.
A massive black scythe, jagged and ancient, its blade curved like a crescent moon forged from nightmares.
The weapon pulsed, oozing green radioactive sludge that sizzled where it touched the ground. Every drop warped the space around it, melting reality just by existing.
Shadow blinked. A scythe, huh? Abazara grinned wickedly. Cute, right?
It's an extension of me, deadly, unstable, and very affectionate when slicing through spines.
The scythe dances. She swung it once. Just once. And a crater formed.
The arc of green magic tore through the land, a radioactive slash that bisected the field and sent waves of energy crashing toward Shadow. Sid, unfazed, leapt into the air, cloak flowing behind him like wings of darkness.
Interesting. That blade, it's feeding off your energy.
Oh no, she purred, vanishing and reappearing behind him midair, it's feeding off yours. Her scythe slashed upward, barely grazing his side.
Just a scratch.
But the corruption started instantly, black veins of tainted slime pulsing from the wound.
Inside Sid's mind. Sid internally. Ah. She's poisoning me with magic I've never seen before. Clearly, this is part of a secret boss encounter meant to test my ultimate limits. Yes. This is good. This is so good.
On the outside, he wiped the blood with 2 fingers and calmly said,
I see. You've got some skill. Shadow Garden, still watching. She has a scythe now. Beta yelled. It's leaking magic that doesn't obey known physics, Epsilon said, trembling. Delta growled. I want one. Alpha simply whispered, he's toying with her.
No, Gamma muttered from her sickbed.
She's toying with him. The fallout of battle. They collided again. Scythe against Shadowblade, green waste against obsidian void.
Each impact created shockwaves of poisoned stardust and shattered mana. Sid darted in close, blade to her throat.
Your movements are chaotic.
I am chaos, she whispered, licking the tip of his sword with a radioactive tongue.
Abazara swept her scythe low, forcing him back.
Her expression had shifted, not playful, not angry, focused.
I've waited long enough. No more dancing. She raised the scythe high.
Magic coiled around her like a serpent of waste and wrath.
Let's see if a god bleeds like a man. Chapter 6, Toxic Worship.
The sky had turned green.
Not metaphorically. Literally.
Abazara stood atop a ridge of blackened stone, radioactive slime dripping from her skin, her side buried in the ground at her side like a grim banner. Around her, the landscape wilted into something that resembled death and worship all at once.
Below, Shadow rose from the rubble, brushing ash off his coat like this was normal.
You're surprisingly durable, she mused, one foot sinking into the cracked earth.
Most things melt after a single kiss. Sid tilted his head. You worship power. But you don't understand it. Abazara blinked, then grinned wide, too wide. Worship? Oh no, darling. This isn't about reverence. This is about obsession. Flashback, the moment of awakening.
She remembered it vividly.
Floating in nothingness.
Sealed in a timeless void by creation itself, pulsing with rage and silence.
Until he appeared.
A ridiculous, handsome idiot who cracked her seal without even realizing it. The first thing she saw was his silhouette. The first thing she felt was purpose.
And now she was alive again.
And she would not let him ignore her.
Back to the present, a deadly confession.
You gave me back the stars, Abazara said, her voice a mix of venom and longing.
The world had forgotten me. But you. She stepped closer, side dragging behind her, hissing against the rock. You awakened me. You broke the silence. Do you understand what that means? Sid's internal monologue. She's delivering her final boss monologue. This is the phase where she reveals her ultimate move. Gotta let it finish before countering.
I don't worship you, Shadow, Abazara whispered, now inches away, her eyes glowing green.
I want to fight you. Bleed with you. Break with you. Die with you.
And if I have to destroy your precious little cult to make you take me seriously. She raised her hand.
Then I will. Toxic bloom. The ground shattered.
Green fire spiraled from her body, twisting upward like a radioactive flower blooming in slow motion.
Her scythe pulsed, absorbing the energy, feeding on it.
She spun once, beautiful, deadly, divine, and unleashed a shockwave that twisted the horizon into toxic ribbons.
Shadow barely avoided it, his cloak torn.
And for the first time, he paused.
You're stronger than I thought. Abazara grinned. Then stop holding back, Shadow. She raised her scythe above her head. Show me the god who woke me. Chapter 7, The Dance of Destruction. Abazara's scythe gleamed with radioactive energy, pulsing with malevolent life.
She raised it high, the very air bending around its cursed presence, and for a moment, it seemed as though time itself held its breath.
Sid didn't move immediately.
His mind raced, calculating, strategizing, analyzing each movement, each flicker of magic that her scythe produced. But then, his grin widened. Let's make this interesting, he muttered, twisting the air around him. The shadows responded. The ground beneath them cracked, and a wave of darkness erupted, swallowing the earth and rising up in tendrils like a violent storm. Abazara's laughter rang out like a thunderclap, her green eyes glowing brighter with each passing moment.
Shadow, she crooned, you don't get it, do you? Sid leapt into the air, shadow wings unfurling behind him, the cloak swirling with void magic.
His eyes burned with a strange anticipation.
Enlighten me. Abazara grinned wider. I'm not your enemy.
I'm your partner in chaos.
With that, she swung her scythe down in a wide arc, and a wave of radioactive decay erupted from the blade, splitting the sky above them and turning the earth to ruin. The collision of their powers sent shockwaves through the forest, bending reality itself. Chapter 8, Unraveling Shadows.
Back at Shadow Garden, Alpha clenched her fists, her gaze fixed on the orb.
Is he going to survive this?
Beta, still recovering from her own wounds, grimaced.
If he doesn't, we'll need to clean up the mess. But that's not what worries me. Zeta tilted her head, eyes widening as the battle between Abazara and Sid escalated. He's enjoying this.
She's not even fighting seriously, and yet, he's giving it his all.
Delta growled low in her throat. This isn't just a battle. This is something else entirely. Abazara's playing with him. She's drawing him into her madness. Chapter 9, The Fractured Mirror. Abazara's laughter grew louder as her scythe cleaved through the dark magic. But something in Sid's eyes shifted.
There was a moment, a fleeting second, when his shadowy expression became something else, something dangerous.
You think this is just fun and games? Sid's voice, normally filled with delusion and dramatics, now held a hint of real intensity.
His shadow magic writhed, twisting in ways it had never done before. Abazara's playful grin faltered for a brief moment, only to return with greater madness.
"Oh, it's never just fun and games," she whispered. "This is love, shadow. Chaos, destruction, power. This is everything."
As the two of them collided once more, Abazara's energy crackled with raw power. Yet, in the back of her mind, a small voice whispered.
A realization. Could it be that she'd awakened something within herself by finding him? Could it be that, by seeking to destroy him, she'd fallen into her own trap? Chapter 10, The Final Act.
The ground had become a war zone, the sky swirling with sickly green clouds, the air thick with corruption.
Both Abazara and Sid had been pushed to their limits, their magic sparking and unraveling as each blow landed. Abazara paused, her breath heavy.
"You're stronger than I thought," she said, her voice full of a strange, intoxicating wonder.
"But I'm still not satisfied. Show me your true power, Shadow. Show me the god you truly are." Sid's eyes flickered with something almost human for a moment.
Then, he spoke with quiet confidence, "I'm not a god.
I'm just Shadow." And in that moment, the true clash began. Abazara and Sid, both at the edge of their limits, finally unleashed the full force of their powers.
A wave of radioactive energy met shadow magic in a cataclysmic explosion, twisting the very fabric of reality around them. As the dust began to settle, Abazara stood, breathing heavily, her scythe raised in triumph. Sid stood opposite her, his cloak tattered, but his grin unwavering. "This is the beginning," Abazara whispered, her eyes glowing with mania. "I'll break your world apart, Shadow, and we'll build something new from the ashes."
Chapter 11, A Dance in the Void. The ground trembled as the final clash between Abazara and Sid echoed through the landscape.
The skies above had torn open, swirling with green and violet hues, as though the heavens themselves were fractured by the intensity of their powers. The air was thick with decay, the weight of radioactive energy pressing down on everything it touched. Abazara stood in the center of the battlefield, her form a silhouette against the destruction. Her green eyes glowed with an almost otherworldly brilliance, her chaotic energy flickering like a dying star. Her scythe, now crackling with the residual power of their battle, dripped with radioactive waste that had long since consumed the ground beneath her. Sid was opposite her, his shadowy form swaying in the wind, the only thing remaining intact after their battle. His black cloak was shredded, his eyes flickering with an unnatural intensity. He was not the detached, calculating figure he usually portrayed. The fight had changed him, or rather, it had forced him to confront something he had been running from for far too long.
"This is what you wanted, isn't it?"
Abazara's voice rang out, distorted by the green haze around them.
"A fight to the death. A test of power." Sid smirked, his expression unchanged, despite the exhaustion that was now evident in his every movement.
"You're mistaken," he said, his voice low and calm, though there was a slight edge to it.
"I didn't want this. I didn't want you." Abazara's lips twisted into a mocking smile. "Lies. You wanted me from the moment you stumbled across my awakening. You're just too cowardly to admit it." He tilted his head, a flicker of curiosity crossing his face. "And what do you think you want, Abazara? You've wanted destruction, chaos, but is it really that simple? Or is there something else? Something deeper?"
She let out a bitter laugh, her voice filled with derision.
"You think you understand me, Shadow? You don't even know what you're fighting.
You're chasing a shadow of your own, a fear that you refuse to acknowledge.
You don't want to fight me. You want to understand me."
Her eyes darkened as she stepped closer, the scythe at her side shimmering with toxic energy.
"And you won't like what you find."
Sid's grin faltered, his eyes narrowing as he tried to process her words. There was something in her tone, a hidden vulnerability beneath the madness. But he couldn't afford to be distracted.
Not now. Not when the world was unraveling around them.
"You're wrong," he said softly, his voice almost wistful.
I've already accepted who I am. And I've already accepted that I'll never understand you.
Abazara's expression shifted, a flicker of something almost like regret, flashing across her face before it vanished, replaced by the manic gleam that always danced in her eyes.
You think you've accepted me? Accepted the chaos I bring?
Her scythe swung through the air, creating a devastating shockwave of energy that tore the ground apart.
You haven't even begun to comprehend what I am. What I've always been.
With that, the two of them collided again, their powers clashing in a cataclysmic explosion.
Sid's shadow magic twisted and rippled, slithering like serpents, while Abazara's radioactive energy cracked and boiled, disintegrating everything it touched.
The force of their blows was so intense that it shattered the earth beneath them, causing fissures to spread like veins of poison. For a moment, there was only the roar of battle, the screech of scythe against shadow, the crackle of destructive magic. But as the dust settled, something shifted. Abazara's breathing was ragged, her energy flickering like a candle in the wind. She was stronger than before, her powers more potent, but they were wearing her down. Sid stood before her, eyes narrowed, his usual composure slipping for the first time since the battle began. "Why are you doing this?" he asked, his voice unusually strained.
"Why fight so desperately? What's driving you, Abazara?" Her laughter echoed in the air, cold and mocking.
"You really don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice low and dangerous.
"I've been asleep for millennia. Trapped, sealed away by the gods.
I was a crownless queen, a force of nature locked in chains.
And now I'm free. But not just free. I'm hungry. Hungry for everything I've lost. Hungry for destruction. Hungry for the chaos that will make this world as broken as I am."
Sid took a step back, the weight of her words settling in his mind. He had always seen Abazara as a mere force of madness, something to be dealt with, neutralized. But now, he was beginning to realize that there was more to her than he could have ever imagined. The desperation in her voice, the unhinged passion with which she fought, it wasn't just about power.
It was about something deeper.
A need that went beyond her chaotic nature. "I'm not your enemy," she continued, her eyes burning with an intense, almost feverish glow.
"You're not my enemy.
We are the same, Shadow. Two lost souls in a world that doesn't understand us."
Sid's expression softened, the shadows around him shifting as if responding to his thoughts.
"We're nothing alike," he said quietly, though there was a trace of uncertainty in his words.
"I fight because I have to. You fight because you want to tear everything down."
"Is that so?" she said, her smile almost tender for a moment. "Then tell me, Shadow. Why do you keep running from who you really are?
From the madness inside you? From the chaos that you crave?"
His hand clenched at his side. "I don't crave chaos," he snapped.
"I crave control." Abazara tilted her head, studying him with a strange intensity. "Control. Is that what you think you want? Control over the world? Over your destiny?"
"I have control," he replied, his voice firm.
"That's all I need." For a long moment, neither of them moved, the tension thick in the air.
Then, without warning, Abazara lunged, her scythe aimed directly at his heart. But Sid was ready this time. He twisted the shadows around him, creating a shield of darkness that absorbed the blow. The impact sent shockwaves through the air, but Sid stood firm, his gaze fixed on her. "Control," she whispered, her voice filled with both contempt and something else.
"It's always about control, isn't it?"
She stepped back, her scythe still dripping with toxic energy.
"Then show me, Shadow. Show me how you can control this. Show me how you can control me."
The ground beneath them cracked open, the world around them beginning to crumble under the weight of their powers. Sid and Abazara stood at the center of it all, two forces of nature locked in a dance of destruction that would reshape the world forever. And as their battle raged on, neither of them could deny the strange, inevitable truth: they were bound together, drawn to one another in a way neither could understand.
Chapter 12, Echoes of a Fallen Crown.
The battlefield was a wasteland, a scar carved deep into the land by the fury of two forces too powerful to be contained. The air was thick with dust, swirling in the aftermath of the chaos that had engulfed the world. The sky above was dim, a sickly green hue lingering where the battle had torn through the heavens, leaving cracks in the fabric of reality itself. Abazara stood at the center of the destruction, her chest rising and falling with labored breath. Her once glorious sight was now dulled, its edges coated with the radioactive waste that had come to define her existence. The ground beneath her feet was cracked and lifeless, nothing more than a reflection of the void that had consumed her over the millennia. She closed her eyes, feeling the remnants of her power pulse through her veins. It was an intoxicating sensation, but it was also fleeting. Every ounce of energy she had poured into the fight had drained her, leaving her empty and hollow. She had pushed herself to the brink, but now, she felt something far more dangerous creeping in: doubt. The sound of footsteps reached her ears, soft yet unmistakable. She didn't need to turn to know who it was. She could feel the presence of Sid even without seeing him. It was the same feeling she had sensed the moment he first arrived, an aura of quiet certainty that contrasted so sharply with the chaos she embodied. "Is this it, then?" she asked, her voice hoarse, carrying a bitter edge.
"This is the end of our dance, Shadow?"
Sid stood a few paces behind her, his shadowed form barely visible in the dying light. His cloak was tattered, his face etched with the exhaustion of their battle, but his eyes, the eyes that always seemed to see everything, never wavered. He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the destruction they had wrought. "No," he finally said, his voice low, but steady.
"It's not the end." Abazara let out a harsh laugh, bitter and hollow. "Is that your answer? You think this pointless destruction was nothing? You think I haven't already won?"
Her shoulders slumped as she turned to face him, her once proud stance faltering.
"You don't even understand what I've lost, what I've been through. Everything I ever had is gone. It was stolen from me. By the gods. By time. By the very fabric of reality." Sid's gaze softened slightly, his voice betraying an emotion that was uncharacteristic of him. "I understand loss. I've lost everything too." For a moment, there was an unsettling silence between them. Abazara's lips parted in surprise, as if she had never expected him to say something so human. For all the distance he maintained, for all the shadows that surrounded him, Sid had never been fully detached from the world. He, too, had been shaped by his own pain. But Abazara's smile was cruel, her eyes narrowing in skepticism. "Loss? She sneered. "You've never known what it means to lose everything. To have the very core of your being ripped away from you, piece by piece. You may wear the mask of a man who's seen suffering, but you're just a shadow of what you could have been. You never had the chance to break." His eyes hardened, but there was no anger in them, only the kind of quiet resignation that came from a lifetime of carrying the weight of an impossible task. "And yet, here you are," he said, his voice even. "Standing in the wreckage of everything you fought for. Is this really what you wanted?" Abazara felt her heart throb painfully at his words. She could feel it, his cold, unwavering certainty that the destruction, the chaos, the madness, were all pointless. And yet, she couldn't bring herself to feel regret. Not yet. Perhaps not ever. "You think this world can be saved?" she asked, her voice rising with growing intensity. "You think that by pretending to be the hero, by controlling your fate, you can undo everything the gods have done to us? To me?" She took a step toward him, her eyes blazing with the fire of her obsession. "The gods cursed me, Shadow. They locked me away because I was too powerful. Too wild. Too much of a threat to them. And they did the same to you, didn't they? They locked you in a cage of your own making, so you could never escape their control." Sid remained unmoving, his expression unchanged. "I wasn't locked away. I locked myself in," he said quietly. "And I did it for a reason. Because I don't need to be like them. I don't need their power, their gods. I have my own strength. And I've accepted that." Abazara's gaze flickered with something like doubt, but she quickly stamped it down.
You've accepted nothing, she spat.
You're just as much a prisoner as I am. Only difference is, you wear your chains like a crown. Sid's eyes flashed with a cold fire. I wear them because they're mine. And I choose to wear them. I choose to keep fighting because I believe there's something worth saving. He paused, his tone growing quieter, more contemplative. And maybe I believe you can be saved too.
Abizarra recoiled as though he had struck her, her heart pounding in her chest.
Save me?
Her voice was a whisper, but the venom in it was palpable.
You still don't get it, do you? You don't understand what I am. What I've become. I've been forgotten by the gods, abandoned by time itself. I've embraced the chaos because it is the only thing left that's real. And now you want to save me? You want to bind me with your ideals of peace and control?
Yes, Sid replied simply. Because, in the end, chaos is just another form of control.
And I'm not afraid of it.
He took a step toward her, his shadow forming a wall of darkness that separated them from the ruins of their battle.
But you are.
Abizarra's eyes widened as she watched him, her heart aching with something she couldn't name.
It wasn't anger. It wasn't hatred. It was fear.
Fear that, somewhere deep inside her, she longed for the peace he spoke of. She longed for it, but she couldn't allow herself to have it. She couldn't allow herself to be tamed. Don't pretend you understand, she whispered, her voice shaking with a hint of something fragile beneath her madness.
You can never understand what it means to be me.
Sid was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke again, his voice was softer than before.
I may not understand you, Abizarra. But I understand what it's like to be lost. And I know that the only way to find yourself again is to stop running from the truth.
Her expression faltered for the briefest of moments. It was only a flicker, a crack in the mask she had built around herself, but it was enough. Enough for Sid to see that the abyss within her was not as endless as she believed. There was something more beneath the chaos. A spark of something that could still be saved. But whether it would be allowed to flourish, was another matter entirely. Abizarra stepped back, her shoulders slumping as her scythe fell loosely to her side. For a moment, she seemed smaller, more vulnerable, like a crownless queen who had been stripped of everything, even her fury.
Maybe, she said softly, almost to herself, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not as free as I thought I was. Sid didn't move. He didn't need to.
He knew that, for now, his words had reached her.
And that was enough.
The silence between them stretched on, filled with the weight of everything they had said, and everything they hadn't.
Chapter 13, The Gods Who Watch.
The realm beyond time was silent, an endless void where light and shadow held no sway.
Here, there were no stars, no planets, no matter to bend and break.
It was a place where the essence of existence itself was distilled into two forms, the eternal flow of time, and the unyielding foundation of creation. At the heart of this realm, the god of time and the god of creation sat in quiet contemplation. Their forms were beyond mortal comprehension, shifting, infinite, and fluid, yet somehow, they were perfectly still. They were both everything and nothing, entities whose very existence defined the fabric of the universe. The god of time, a being of endless movement, was like the river that never ceased, its currents flowing in patterns no mortal could ever fully understand. His body was formless, composed of ripples that distorted the very concept of space around him, yet within those ripples were the echoes of all past, present, and future events. His eyes, when visible, were not eyes at all, just spheres of endless reflection, each one showing a different moment in time. The god of creation, in contrast, was solid, grounded in a form that defied the laws of nature. He was both a sculptor and a creator, his hands forming and unforming worlds with but a thought. His body was composed of shimmering golden light, wrapped in complex geometries that bent and folded in ways that could only be described as divine. He held the universe in his hands like a master artisan, capable of both making and breaking it in the blink of an eye. His eyes were infinite voids, black as the deepest abyss, reflecting only the potential of creation itself. Though they were different in form and function, they were bound by a common purpose, to maintain the balance of the cosmos, to shape and uphold the laws that governed all things. They were the architects of reality. Time measured the flow, and creation built the structure upon which that flow would unfold. The god of time spoke first, his voice a soft echo that resonated through the void like the distant hum of a clock winding down.
It has been long, hasn't it?
His tone was not one of regret but of inevitability. Time was always long, stretching out into eternity without end. But there was a trace of something else in his voice, something subtle, something like curiosity.
The god of creation did not move, his form radiating an unspoken authority.
His voice was deeper, more solid, as though each word was a pillar upon which the cosmos rested.
Long enough for her to return. I felt the tremors. She stirs.
A faint ripple of recognition passed through Time's form, but there was no emotion in his response, only the detached observation of one who had seen the unfolding of countless histories.
Abizara, he said, as though the name held no weight. A crownless queen, sealed away by the very hands of creation. How many cycles have passed since that moment? How many worlds have turned? The god of creation's eyes, those infinite voids, deepened in their gaze. Too many, he replied simply.
But her seal is weakening.
I can feel it.
The bonds we forged are no longer enough to keep her contained. Her power, he hesitated, then spoke with finality, has been fed by the very chaos we sought to control.
The god of time's form flickered, the ripples of his being vibrating as though agitated by an unseen current. She was never meant to exist this way. She was a creation that defied time itself. A force too dangerous to remain unbridled. A shadow flickered within the void, a remnant of a memory. The moment when Abizara, fierce and untamable, had wielded her power in ways no mortal or god could control. The moment when she had threatened the very balance of the cosmos, challenging even the gods. Abizara was a creature of chaos, the god of creation continued, his voice a low rumble like the shifting of tectonic plates. She was born to be free, unbound by time, unshackled by the structure of the worlds we forged. But freedom, as you know, is a dangerous thing. It was not her fault. It was the nature of her existence. She was an anomaly.
And so we sealed her, Time said, his voice barely a whisper, yet carrying the weight of millennia.
We had no choice. She was too dangerous to be allowed to roam.
So we placed her in the tomb of creation itself, a prison where time would never touch her, where she could never again be a threat.
The god of creation's form shimmered faintly as if recalling the act itself.
Yes, and in doing so, we erased her from all existence. She was lost to time, locked away in a place where she could neither live nor die, where she would be forgotten.
We gave her no name, no memory, no future. She became a ghost of creation. A mistake.
There was a pause between them, a lingering silence that stretched out like the ebbing of a tide. She remembers, Time said suddenly, his voice carrying an edge of regret, though it was barely perceptible. She remembers it all, the curse, the betrayal, the loss. She was once a queen, a ruler among her own, before her world crumbled. And now she seeks to undo it all. To break the chains we placed on her, to become the chaos she was always meant to be. And we cannot let her, creation responded, his voice turning steely, resolute. If she succeeds, if she is allowed to escape the confines we set for her, there will be no end to the destruction she will cause. The very laws of the universe will fracture beneath her. She will bring about the end of all things. Time's form rippled again, as though reflecting on the vastness of such an outcome. But she is no longer the same. She has changed. Time has shaped her as much as we have. Perhaps she is the very embodiment of our error, an anomaly that defies the boundaries we set.
Perhaps there is no turning back.
And perhaps, the god of creation mused, there is no need to. Time's ripples flickered again, but this time, there was something more, an understanding.
You are right, he said.
She is a force of nature, but even a force of nature must be balanced. We cannot destroy her, nor can we let her roam free. There is a delicate equilibrium between us and her, between the chaos of her being and the order we maintain. Creation's golden light dimmed, the faintest glint of hesitation reflecting in his vast form.
Perhaps there is a way.
A final measure to ensure that she does not tip the scales into destruction. A way to let her live again, but under our watch. To allow her to find her place without undoing everything we have worked for. Time's form stilled, and for the first time in an eternity, there was quiet understanding between them. Then we will wait, he said. And we will watch. If she escapes, if she seeks to destroy what we have built, we will act. But if she seeks redemption. The god of creation nodded, his golden form shimmering with a deep, quiet acceptance. Then we shall offer it, in whatever form it may take. Chapter 14, A Dance of Shadows and Chaos. Abazara's crimson eyes flickered with fury as she stepped into the dimly lit alley, her black scythe trailing behind her like a dark omen. The green, radioactive waste that covered her body pulsed with a life of its own, seeping into the ground, poisoning it with each step she took. The air itself seemed to distort around her, rippling in unnatural waves as her very presence corrupted the reality of the space she occupied. It was no longer a question of whether she would find him. No. It was a certainty, a force of nature, an inevitable collision between the chaos she embodied and the shadowed calm that Sid exuded. And there he was. Sid stood in the center of the alley, unfazed by the shift in the air, the weight of her presence pressing down on him like a storm ready to break. His dark eyes, hidden behind his signature mask, locked onto her without the slightest hint of fear. His calm demeanor, his confidence in the face of impending chaos, made him a figure of impossible calm. Abazara, Sid's voice was smooth, almost casual, as though he were speaking to an old acquaintance. I was wondering when you'd show up. Abazara's lips curled into a smile, sharp and cruel, her fangs gleaming in the darkness. You knew I'd come for you, she purred, her voice dripping with malice. It was only a matter of time. Time. That word. It set her nerves on edge, a reminder of the gods who had sealed her away, the gods who had deemed her a threat. Their mistake. Their curse. Their failure. And now she was here, hunting down the one who had unknowingly freed her. She could almost taste the thrill of it, the raw, untapped potential to destroy everything they had built. I've waited long enough, she said, her scythe shifting in her grip. The green waste on its blade writhed as if alive, reflecting the malice swirling within her. Sid remained unmoving. You've been sealed for so long, he said softly, almost as if reflecting on her curse. But I wonder, what's left of you, Abazara? Is there any part of you that remembers what you once were? Her eyes narrowed, the fury rising within her like a storm. I remember everything, she spat. I remember being a queen, a ruler. I remember the pain, the betrayal, the gods who thought they could contain me. I remember the power that was stolen from me, and I remember the curse they placed upon me. She lifted her scythe, the tip of the blade trailing across the ground, leaving a line of green destruction in its wake. You freed me, Sid. And now, you will regret it. Sid tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. I didn't free you, Abazara. I merely unlocked a door. What you do with the freedom you've been given is your choice. But, he paused, eyes flicking briefly to her side, if you think you're the only one with power, you're mistaken. Abazara's grin widened, the dark energy around her coiling like a serpent ready to strike. Power? You think you can stop me, Shadow? What are you but a man who hides in the darkness, playing at games he doesn't understand? You, who are nothing more than a mere shadow of the real power that exists in this world? Her voice rose in anger, the words coming faster now. You were never meant to be my equal. You were never meant to face me. With a swift, fluid motion, she swung her scythe, sending a wave of destructive energy hurtling toward him. The green waste coated the air as it spread, distorting everything in its path, rippling reality itself with its sheer force. But Sid was already moving. With an almost lazy flick of his wrist, his shadowed form shifted, blurring into the darkness of the alley. The wave of energy passed harmlessly through the space he had once occupied, leaving only the faintest distortion in the air. Abazara's eyes gleamed with fury. You'll need more than that to escape me, Shadow. Sid's voice came from the darkness, soft and mocking.
I don't need to escape you, Abazara. I only need to outlast you.
The shadows around him began to shift, coalescing into forms that seemed to stretch and reach for the scythe-wielding figure before them. In an instant, the very air itself became a battlefield, and Abazara found herself surrounded by countless shadowy figures, extensions of Sid's power, each one capable of striking with deadly precision.
Abazara's scythe spun through the air, cutting down each shadow with ease, but there were more.
The shadows stretched and twisted like living things, impossible to destroy completely. And through them, Sid's voice echoed again, cold and distant.
You're not the only one who can bend the world around them.
The shadows moved with terrifying precision, each one designed to weaken her, to outpace her, to force her into submission. They were a countermeasure to her chaotic power, a perfect foil to the destruction she could bring. But the longer she fought them, the more she realized just how well prepared Sid was. This wasn't the battle of a man against a monster, it was the clash of two forces that had been forged for this very moment. Her anger, once an all-consuming fire, began to shift into something more, something deeper. It was the instinct of a predator, the understanding that she had underestimated her foe. He was no mere shadow. He was a force unto himself, a being whose mastery of his own power rivaled her own. Impressive, she purred, her voice still laced with venom.
But you still don't understand, do you? I'm not like the others you've faced. I'm not bound by your petty limitations. I am chaos incarnate.
And with that, she unleashed her full power. The green waste that clung to her body began to surge outward, a tidal wave of radioactive corruption that twisted the air around her, bending it to her will. The scythe in her hand grew heavier, the energy of destruction coursing through it like an unstoppable force. Sid's eyes narrowed beneath his mask, the shadows around him flickering as he focused his power. Then let's see if chaos can defeat the inevitable, he muttered under his breath.
Chapter 15, The Veil of Shadows.
The alley shook with the intensity of Abazara's chaotic power. The green radioactive waste that leaked from her form expanded outward like an infectious wave, warping the very fabric of reality as it consumed everything in its path. The air buzzed with tension, and even the shadows around Sid seemed to tremble. He moved again, vanishing into the shadows, leaving only the faintest trace of his presence.
Abazara's eyes followed him, her grin widening with each passing second.
You think hiding in the dark will save you, she sneered, the scythe in her hand vibrating with deadly energy. But Sid's voice echoed from all around her, his tone mocking.
You misunderstand, Abazara. Darkness isn't a hiding place. It's a weapon.
The ground beneath her feet buckled as the shadows surged, splitting open like wounds in reality. From within these wounds, shadowy tendrils shot forth, wrapping around her legs, pulling her into the dark chasm below.
Abazara laughed, the sound like the crash of thunder.
So, you used the darkness to trap me?
How quaint.
She twisted her body, her power exploding outward in an eruption of green light that shattered the tendrils around her. The radioactive energy burned through the shadows, disintegrating them in a flash of light.
But the darkness was relentless. More tendrils formed, coiling and attacking with a precision that no living creature could match. Abazara struck again and again with her scythe, cutting down the tendrils as they appeared, but they kept coming.
She could feel the frustration rising within her. This wasn't a battle she could win through sheer force alone.
And yet, she wasn't foolish.
There was more to Sid's power than just his shadows. There was something else at play here, something deeper.
Chapter 16, The Heart of the Darkness.
Sid watched the battle unfold from the deepest recesses of the shadows.
He didn't need to be physically present to know what Abazara was thinking. He had seen this before, in battles of greater magnitude.
Her rage, her hunger for destruction, these were things that would eventually burn her out if she didn't control them. You can't just keep swinging that scythe forever, he said, his voice emerging from the void. Eventually, you'll exhaust yourself. Abazara's head snapped toward the direction of his voice, her glowing eyes narrowing. I don't need your advice, Shadow.
I don't need anything from you.
Sid's shadowy form coalesced in front of her, stepping out of the darkness with an air of quiet authority.
Then you're a fool.
The moment he stepped into the light, the air seemed to shift, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Sid's form was imposing, an almost ethereal figure wrapped in shadows. But it was his eyes, hidden behind the mask, that held the true power, those cold, calculating eyes that saw the world not as it was, but as it could be. "I didn't come here to kill you, Abazara," he said softly, his voice devoid of emotion.
"I came to stop you from destroying everything. You're not just chaos. You're an imbalance. And that is dangerous."
Abazara's grip tightened around her scythe, her body trembling with rage.
"You speak like you understand me, but you don't.
You don't know what it's like to be locked away for centuries, to be cursed by the gods, to be cast aside as though you were nothing but a forgotten dream."
Sid's shadowy hands spread out, the tendrils of darkness thickening around them. "I don't need to understand you. But I know what happens when power goes unchecked. It consumes everything."
Her scythe moved again, slashing through the shadows with ferocity, but Sid's form remained an enigma, shifting between the light and dark, never staying in one place long enough for her to strike.
Chapter 17, Echoes of the Past.
As the battle raged on, Abazara's mind wandered briefly to the past. To the time before the gods sealed her away. To the days when she was a queen, when the world bowed to her will, and her power was absolute. She could still remember the thrum of power in her veins, the feeling of the world bending to her desires.
And then the betrayal.
The gods had feared her. The gods had sealed her away in a prison of time and space, locking her away as though she were nothing more than a passing threat. They had made a mistake.
A grave mistake.
Abazara's grip on her scythe tightened, the green energy swirling around her becoming more erratic.
She could feel it, the desire to rip through everything.
To tear apart the gods' creations and leave only chaos in her wake. But then something caught her attention, something subtle, hidden beneath the surface of the battle.
Sid wasn't trying to kill her. Not really.
He was trying to make her see something.
What, exactly, she wasn't sure.
But there was something in his calm demeanor, in the way he moved, in the way he wielded his power. It wasn't just control.
It was something deeper. Chapter 18, A Moment of Clarity.
The battle paused for a brief, strange moment.
Abazara stood still, scythe in hand, watching Sid as he stood motionless before her.
The green radioactive energy around her body hummed with tension, and her eyes flickered between fury and something more, something she hadn't felt in centuries, doubt.
Sid's form remained unmoving, his shadow stretching and flickering like a living thing.
There was no malice in his gaze, no arrogance.
Just an unwavering focus, like a hunter studying its prey. "Why?" Abazara asked, her voice softer than it had been before. "Why not destroy me?" Sid tilted his head, a faint smile hidden beneath his mask. "Because that's not what you need."
Abazara's eyes widened, her grip loosening on her scythe ever so slightly.
"What do you mean?"
Sid stepped closer, the shadows parting as he approached.
"You've been alone for so long, Abazara.
Alone in your hatred, in your rage, in your endless pursuit of power.
You think it's what you want, but it's not.
What you need is to understand the world beyond destruction."
Abazara's heart raced.
She didn't know why, but something about his words pierced through the madness inside her. She had never stopped to consider what it was she truly wanted, only what she had lost. "You think you can change me," she scoffed, but even she could hear the crack in her voice. Sid's response was simple, but it struck at the core of everything she had known.
"I'm not here to change you, Abazara. I'm here to show you that there's more than just destruction. That even you can have a choice." Chapter 19, The Breaking Point.
The air between them thickened once more, and for a long moment, neither moved. The echoes of their battle hung in the balance, the tension almost unbearable. Abazara stood frozen, her mind racing as the words of Sid echoed in her thoughts. For the first time in centuries, she wasn't sure what to do. Her scythe lowered slightly, the green waste that coated it beginning to fade as the rage inside her faltered. She was a creature born of destruction, but what if she didn't have to be? Sid took one more step toward her, his form casting long shadows in the dim light.
The world doesn't have to end in chaos. It can be something more. Abizara opened her mouth to retort, but her words died in her throat. And in that moment, she knew.
She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt the weight of choice, the weight of the path before her.
Chapter 20, The Weight of Choice.
Abizara stood there, her breath catching as the weight of Sid's words settled in her chest. She had spent centuries embracing chaos, feeding off the destruction of those who dared to stand in her way. The very idea that she could choose a different path felt foreign, impossible, even. But the look in Sid's eyes wasn't one of judgment. It was one of understanding, something she hadn't encountered in so long. Her scythe hummed faintly in her grasp, its radioactive glow dimming with the storm of emotions inside her.
Was this how the world had changed since her sealing? Had it always been so full of choices? So full of options she hadn't considered?
Abizara stood there, her breath catching as the weight of Sid's words settled in her chest. She had spent centuries embracing chaos, feeding off the destruction of those who dared to stand in her way. The very idea that she could choose a different path felt foreign, impossible, even. But the look in Sid's eyes wasn't one. "Why are you so certain of me?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying an edge of vulnerability she had never shown before.
Sid didn't answer immediately. Instead, he let the silence linger between them, stretching and pulling like an invisible thread. He seemed to be watching her, really watching her, for the first time, with no pretense. His form, bathed in shadows, was almost like a void, but his eyes were piercing. "Because I know what it's like to feel trapped," he said, his voice low and steady. "I've seen what happens when power becomes your only option. You become a prisoner of your own making." Abizara's fingers tightened around the scythe.
The memories flooded back, days of ruling, of being untouchable, followed by the crushing blow of betrayal. She had been sealed away because of her power. Not because she was dangerous, but because she was a threat to the established order.
"I was never given a choice," she muttered. "The gods locked me away because they feared me." Sid's form shifted, stepping closer. "The gods lock away power they cannot control. That doesn't mean you don't have a choice. You just need to see it."
She clenched her teeth, unwilling to show him the crack in her resolve. She couldn't let him see it, couldn't let him know that part of her, the part that longed for something more than endless chaos, was listening.
Chapter 21, The Mirror of Reflection. The following night, Abizara found herself alone in a chamber beneath the ruins of an ancient temple. The battle had ended, at least for now.
Sid had left her with the silence, and she could hear the sound of her own thoughts echoing in the empty space. Her surroundings were a stark contrast to the frenzy of power and destruction she was accustomed to. The air was still here, heavy with the weight of ages, as if the temple itself had been forgotten by time. She sat cross-legged in the center of the room, her scythe resting beside her. It was strange, she had always been the center of attention, the one who commanded every room she entered. But now, there was only the quiet, and it gnawed at her. The shadows of her past rose up to meet her. She remembered the first time she had felt that power, the thrill of knowing she could bend the very earth to her will. How easy it had been to destroy everything in her path, to take what she wanted without question, without hesitation. The gods had feared her because she had no limits. They had locked her away, but not before she had torn the world asunder. She had been their weapon, their ruler, and then their prison. But what had it brought her? Loneliness. Isolation. A hunger that could never be sated. Abizara looked into the shadows surrounding her, but this time, they felt different. The darkness seemed to reach back, offering something, not a threat, not destruction, but a choice. For the first time in centuries, she wasn't sure what her next move would be. "Is this what you wanted, Abizara?" she whispered to herself, her voice barely audible. "To destroy it all?" The room seemed to pulse with an answer. Perhaps it was only the wind, but she swore she felt the world itself leaning toward her, as if it was waiting for her decision. Chapter 22, The Tipping Point. Days passed in a haze. Sid appeared again, his form drifting in and out of the shadows as though he never truly left.
But this time, something was different. Abazara could feel it.
The tension between them had shifted, subtly, imperceptibly, but it was there.
She couldn't stop thinking about what he had said. About choice.
About the possibility of something beyond destruction. They met in the heart of a ruined city, where the skyline was broken and jagged, like teeth of a beast long dead. The air was thick with the remnants of past conflicts, the echoes of wars that had ravaged the land.
Sid's figure emerged from the shadows once more, his calm demeanor unshaken.
But this time, there was something more in his eyes, something that Abazara couldn't quite place.
"You've been thinking, haven't you?" Sid said, his voice as smooth as ever, though there was a hint of something new there. Was it anticipation? Or perhaps, hope? Abazara turned her gaze toward him, her face unreadable. Thinking, yes. And feeling.
She stepped forward, her scythe dragging behind her as if it were a weight she no longer wanted to carry.
But it doesn't change anything. I've been locked away for centuries. The gods have already decided my fate.
Sid shook his head slowly, almost pityingly.
You're not a puppet of the gods, Abazara. You're a being with free will. Don't let them define you. Don't let them control you any longer.
The words hit harder than she expected. She clenched her fists, her eyes narrowing, but the sting of truth was undeniable.
Then what do you expect me to do, Shadow? Do you expect me to walk away from everything I've ever known? To turn my back on the power that has defined me? Sid's shadowy form shifted, moving closer to her. I don't expect you to walk away. I expect you to choose. To choose whether you want to destroy the world, or save it. Abazara stood still, feeling as though the very earth beneath her feet was crumbling.
The world was offering her a choice, and the weight of it crushed her.
Could she truly make that decision? Chapter 23, The Crucible of Power. The days after their meeting blurred together. Abazara couldn't shake the weight of Sid's words.
She had spent so long clinging to the power she had been born with, the power that had defined her existence. But now, for the first time, she felt the pull of something else. Her scythe was always at her side, the radioactive energy constantly flowing, a reminder of her chaotic nature. But now, it felt less like a weapon and more like a burden. The power she had once reveled in now seemed hollow, empty.
It had never brought her true satisfaction, only more destruction, more pain.
The temptation to let it all go, to walk away from the chaos that had consumed her, was overwhelming.
But the path was not an easy one.
The gods had cursed her with immortality, had bound her to a fate of endless torment.
Could she break free from that curse? Could she defy the very nature of her existence?
Her thoughts were interrupted when a sudden pulse of energy reverberated through the air. It was the familiar presence of Sid, drawing near once more. But this time, there was something different about him, a dark intensity, a sense of purpose that seemed to echo in the very shadows around him.
He stood before her, his figure tall and unwavering.
I've been waiting for you to make a decision, he said quietly, his voice softer than it had been before.
But I think you already know what you need to do.
Abazara's grip tightened around her scythe, her eyes narrowing.
And what is that? Sid's gaze locked onto hers, unflinching. It's time to stop running from who you are. It's time to face the truth of your power.
The words hung in the air like an unspoken challenge. Abazara's breath quickened, her heart racing with a mix of fear and anticipation.
The moment of choice was upon her.
She had to decide, destroy or create. Chaos or order. And the path she took would determine not just her fate, but the fate of the world itself.
Chapter 24, The Choice Unmade. The city was still, the silence of the battlefields hanging thick in the air. The two figures stood at the heart of the ruined city, facing each other as if the weight of the entire world pressed down upon them.
Abazara's gaze was intense, her scythe humming with power in her grasp. Sid stood unfazed, his shadows wrapping around him like an armor, a presence that seemed unshakable.
Abazara had made no move to attack.
Her mind was torn, caught between the rage that had defined her existence for centuries and the strange pull of something different, something she could barely comprehend. "What happens if I choose to walk away?" she asked, her voice uncertain for the first time in ages. Sid's response was simple, but it carried a depth that resonated with her very soul. "Then the world will change. You'll change." Abizara hesitated. The future stretched out before her, an unknown path filled with uncertainty. She could feel the power of the scythe coursing through her, tempting her to lash out, to embrace the destruction that had been her purpose for so long. But something else lingered in the air, something that whispered of hope. She didn't know if she was ready to make that choice. But the world would never be the same again. And neither would she. Final chapter, the beginning of a new era. The ruins of the ancient city stretched out like a forgotten monument, its skeletal remains standing silent witness to the countless battles fought in its streets. The winds whispered through the broken walls, carrying with them the echoes of a time long past. Yet, in this place, amidst the desolation, something new was stirring, something that had not been seen for centuries. Abizara stood at the heart of it all, the weight of the moment pressing down on her shoulders. Her scythe was no longer the instrument of destruction it once was. Now, it felt like an extension of her own being, a reflection of her inner turmoil. The radioactive glow that had once burned so fiercely now flickered faintly, as though it too were uncertain of the future. Beside her stood Sid at shadow, his calm presence a stark contrast to the maelstrom of thoughts swirling in her mind. His gaze was unwavering, his expression unreadable. The shadows that surrounded him seemed to pulse with life, mirroring the tension in the air. "You've come to a decision," Sid said softly, his voice carrying a weight that was both understanding and expectation. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. Abizara's heart beat loudly in her chest, and for the first time in centuries, she felt the stirrings of hope. Hope? Was that what this was? Could this be the moment she had been searching for all her life? Or was it simply another illusion, another fleeting thought to distract her from the truth of her existence? "I have," she answered, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. She could feel the power of the choice she had made settling into her bones. The decision was both terrifying and exhilarating, the burden of it heavy on her soul. Her fingers curled around the scythe's handle, its blade gleaming in the dim light of the ruined city. "I choose to create," she said, the words flowing from her lips with a finality that surprised her. "I choose to forge a new path, one where chaos doesn't rule the world." Sid nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. "Then the era of destruction ends. A new age begins." For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The city, once filled with the sounds of war, now stood still waiting for the change to come. Abizara raised her scythe, and for the first time in centuries, she swung it not in anger or wrath, but with purpose. The blade sliced through the air, its edge glowing softly as it cut through the ruins before her. As it did, something extraordinary began to happen. The land trembled beneath her feet, the very earth reacting to her decision. From the point where the scythe had struck the ground, a surge of energy radiated outward. It wasn't destructive, it was restorative. The ruins began to shift, crumbling walls slowly knitting themselves back together, shattered structures beginning to rise again. The dead earth beneath her feet began to pulse with life, plants sprouting from the cracks in the stone as if the very world itself was waking from a long slumber. Abizara closed her eyes, her breath steady as she watched the world around her change. It was as though she had unlocked something within herself, something ancient and powerful, but also capable of healing. "You've done it," Sid said, his voice filled with awe. "You've rewritten the rules of power." Abizara opened her eyes, her gaze sweeping over the transformation before her. The city, once a symbol of decay and ruin, was now alive again. The buildings, though broken, stood with new strength. The winds carried the scent of growth and renewal, and the air felt charged with possibility. "This is only the beginning," she said softly, her voice full of determination. "There is still much to do. The world will not change overnight, but it can change. I can change it." Sid stepped closer, his shadows lingering in the air like a protective cloak. "And you will."
You've chosen a new path, Abazara.
A path where power is not a means of control, but a tool for creation. But remember, the journey will not be easy. There will be challenges, and there will be those who resist the change you bring.
I know, she said, turning to face him fully. But I'm not alone anymore.
Sid's smile grew, genuine this time, and for a moment, Abazara felt a warmth inside her that she hadn't known in centuries. It was the warmth of hope, of the possibility of a future where she was no longer the weapon of destruction, but the architect of something new. Together, they stood in the heart of the ruined city, now reborn, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The world had changed, and so had she.
Abazara was no longer the crownless, the destroyer, the prisoner of fate.
She was something more, a force of change, a force for creation. And in that moment, as the winds of the new era began to stir, Abazara knew one thing for certain. This was the beginning of a new world.
Epilogue, the dawn of the new age.
As the sun rose over the horizon, casting its golden light upon the transformed city, Abazara stood at the highest point of the ruins, gazing out over the land she had sworn to reshape. The world before her was vast, full of potential, and ripe for change. It was a new beginning, not just for her, but for all of creation. In the distance, she could see the first signs of life returning to the land, small villages rising from the ashes, once destroyed forests beginning to regrow.
The world was healing, and with every passing moment, the old era of chaos faded further into the past.
Sid stood by her side, his presence a steadying force. The shadows around him seemed to shimmer with a quiet satisfaction. He had seen the potential in her, had believed in her when no one else would. And now, together, they would face whatever came next.
Abazara smiled, the first genuine smile she had worn in centuries.
The path ahead was unknown, but one thing was certain, it was hers to walk. The era of destruction was over. The era of creation had begun.